Good morning, David.
Good morning, Karat.
Tell us, what types of risks are common in developing nations?
All nations are exposed to risks, and we talked about that in an earlier question, which arise from a whole range of both internal and external sources. And developing nations have similar risks to other nations. But I think there are perhaps four particular challenges that developing nations face. One is to do with resources, both acquiring resources from outside. Often there are, that might include energy, it might include water, it might include food, it might include higher technology to support the society. Or it might, under the resources heading, we might talk about how to use their own resources. And of course, remembering that risk includes both threats and opportunities. There's an opportunity to use their internal resources, but often that's not used wisely, and sometimes the internal resources within developing nations are exploited, either by the leadership or by outsiders who come in and take things in a way that is not fair and appropriate. So resources, and that of course includes human resources. There are lots of risks in developing nations that arise from the population, or which could affect the population, or opportunities from within the population itself. So resources are a key area of risk for developing nations in making sure that we talked about nations having three objectives: to respect the past, protect the present, and secure the future. And very often for developing nations, it's the last of those two which are at risk. To protect the present and make sure that they can care for their people and protect their people, but also to make sure the future is secure. So resources is one. Related to that is infrastructure. In order to support a developing nation, infrastructure is very important, whether it be roads and air links or ports, or whether it's public transport or hospitals, or internet availability or mobile phone coverage. All of the infrastructure that's necessary to support the development of the country, I think is another particular area of risk, a type of risk that they're exposed to. And again, both threats and opportunities. In the developed world, if you want to, say in England, in the UK, at the moment we have a project to introduce fast broadband across the country. But we have a legacy of slow broadband with copper wires, and so we have to replace what's there, replace the copper with fibre optic and so on. Often in developing countries, the opportunity is that it's a blank page. They don't have anything legacy to replace, and so you can go in with the best, latest new technology, and so it's not always a bad thing.
Agreed.
So we have resources and infrastructure. Then I think the next major area of risk for developing nations is dependence. Because they are looking for support and looking for encouragement and looking for investment from outside, then it's too easy for them to become dependent on others outside of the nation itself. And whilst that's useful, dependence can become a crutch, can become a binding of the nation, which restricts its ability to command its own destiny and control its own future. So always very important to be careful about dependence and building dependence as a developing nation. And the last thing I draw attention to is demographics. It's very common for developing nations to have a high proportion of young people. And there might be a smaller aging population, and often 40, 50, sometimes 60% of a developing nation can be under the age of 20. And that introduces a whole range of both threats and opportunities. We talked about the three objectives of nation building being to respect the past and protect the present and secure the future. And often with such a large demographic of younger people, respecting the past is a difficult objective to achieve because they're always looking to the future and looking to the new, rejecting the way of their parents and their forefathers. Yeah. And you have a decreasing older population, which is where the wisdom and the experience is. And if that's not respected and used, then the young people can find themselves without a framework, without a national identity within which to work. And I think this is, again, a major area of uncertainty for the leaders of developing nations to be aware of and to try to manage. And the danger is that they're seen as weak in some way or as needy. And I think developing nations need to remember their identity. You know, nations have history, nations have traditions, nations have culture, which we've talked about before, all of which makes them unique. And I think even developing nations really need to have a strong sense of who they are, why they exist, who their people are, and where they're going. And not to become victims, but instead to take a full view of the risks that they face, both threats and opportunities, and make sure they're managed effectively at national level.
Thank you so much, David, for the wonderful insights.
It's a pleasure.